Deion Sanders hurt his son Shedeur in the draft process.
So the Eagles and the Ravens were interested. They're like, we ain't talking to you.
Two teams wanted Shedeur Sanders in the 2025 draft. Two teams that already had real questions at quarterback. And according to Colin Cowherd, both of them got turned away before they ever picked up the phone. Not by the league, not by a bad grade, by his own father. Cowherd says this isn't something he heard once at a bar. It's something people inside the NFL have been telling him for 20 years. Today, we're breaking down exactly what happened with the Eagles, the Ravens, and the deal Deion Sanders refused to even discuss, and why it might have cost his son millions. When a talented player falls in the draft, there's usually a reason. Sometimes it's behavioral, sometimes it's medical, and sometimes it's something nobody wants to say out loud. Colin Cowherd said it anyway. On his own podcast, Cowherd looked at the camera and said Deion Sanders hurt his son in the draft process. Not the tape, not the arm talent, the process. Cowherd was blunt about where that claim came from. He said he was told this by people he has been talking to inside the NFL for 20 years. That's not a random tweet or a burner account. That's a guy with 2 decades of league sources telling him the same thing. And the thing they kept telling him was simple. Deion's media tour during Super Bowl week, all that talk about not playing for bad teams, it did not play well behind closed doors. Teams that were rebuilding heard that, and they remembered it. Here's what makes this sting even more. Cowherd said he watched about 10 of Shedeur's college games himself before forming an opinion. He wasn't going off highlight reels or somebody else's grade sheet. His read was that Shedeur got significantly underdrafted. At worst, a late second rounder, maybe the very top of the third. Instead, he went in the 5th round, pick 144. That's not a small gap. That's the difference between a guaranteed roster spot with real developmental time built in and a player who has to fight for every single rep just to prove he belongs on the field. And Cowherd's evaluation wasn't just vibes or loyalty to a big name. He pointed out real flaws too, the kind of flaws that show up when you actually watch the tape closely instead of just reading a mock draft. Shedeur holds the ball too long, something that showed up in college and followed him straight into the pros. That part is fair, and it's right there on film. Cowherd even compared it to what Caleb Williams dealt with in his first year, a talented passer who needed time to speed up his internal clock. That's a real coachable problem. It's the kind of thing offensive coordinators fix with reps and film study, not the kind of thing that should knock a player down 80 or 90 picks. What isn't as fixable, according to Cowherd, is a perception problem that got created before Shedeur ever threw a single pass as a professional. Front offices talk to each other, scouts compare notes. Once 1 or 2 organizations start whispering the same thing about how a family handled the process, it spreads through the league fast, and it spreads quietly. Nobody puts it in a press release. It just shows up in the draft slide nobody can fully explain. That's the part of this story that never gets talked about enough on national television. The tape said one thing about Shedeur Sanders. The room said something completely different, and the room won.
I don't think any reasonable person could deny what I'm about to say. Deion Sanders hurt his son Shedeur in the draft process. I was told that by people that I've been talking to for 20 years in the NFL. Like, it did not, that position, that behavior, kind of arrogantly dismissing certain organizations, the ones who are bad that wanted to draft you. So the other day I saw Deion on the practice field, and I thought, God, Deion, you have no self-awareness.
Let that sink in. A 20-year NFL insider network, and they're all saying the same name. So what actually happened during that pre-draft window? Cowherd painted a picture of Deion showing up to the media rounds acting like certain organizations weren't even worth his son's time. Bad teams, losing teams, teams that would have actually given Shedeur real snaps early. And instead of staying quiet and letting the tape speak, the family's approach came across as dismissive, arrogant even, according to how Cowherd described it. Then Cowherd brought up something that hit different. He said he saw Deion on the Browns' practice field recently, and his first thought wasn't anger, it was almost sympathy. He said Deion has no self-awareness about how that. Then he made a comparison that stuck. LeBron James has a son in the league now too, Bronny, but LeBron isn't hovering over every decision, isn't getting in the way of the coaching staff, isn't inserting himself into meetings. He stepped back and let the actual coaches run the show.
That's the contrast Cowherd was drawing. One legendary athlete father who knows when to disappear into the background, and one legendary athlete father who, by Cowherd's account, never quite learned to do that. Cowherd's co-host jumped in here too, bringing up an article about the exact same dynamic, saying front offices were essentially waiting for Deion to bend the knee a little, and it never really happened. Here's the thing that makes this so frustrating for Shedeur specifically. He's not some unproven system quarterback who lucked into good stats behind a stacked roster. Cowherd said flat out that his teammates like playing with him, that receivers like him specifically because he'll actually push the ball down the field instead of dinking and dunking it short on every single play. That's a trait NFL offenses covet. Coaches can teach a quarterback to check down. It's a lot harder to teach one to trust his arm downfield in the first place. Cowherd also went after one of the laziest criticisms that followed Shedeur through the whole process, the idea that he's not athletic enough for the modern NFL. He compared his mobility directly to guys like Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford, both of whom are basically statues in the pocket, and both of whom have Super Bowl rings to show for it. His point was simple. Shedeur moves fine. He's not a runner in the Lamar Jackson mold. Nobody's claiming that. But the idea that he can't function outside a clean pocket never held up once someone actually sat down and watched the college tape, instead of repeating a label that got attached to him early and just never got questioned. So if the talent was there, and the tape backed it up according to somebody who actually studied it, what was really driving 32 front offices to pass on him pick after pick after pick? Cowherd's answer keeps circling back to the exact same place every time. Not the arm, not the reads, not even the ball security issue, real as it is. The room, the way the pre-draft process got handled before a single team ever got to sit across the table from him.
I don't know why you worked for an NFL team. I just thought, get out of this kid's way. LeBron James likes to play with Bronny, but he's not getting in the way of him. He is separated. The JJ is going to play him Reddick when he wants to play him. When you saw Deion, how did it land for you?
Well, I actually read the article yesterday. I think Jason Lloyd, who covers the Cleveland area for the
Yes,
Athletic.
I read it too, yeah.
And, last year they wouldn't bend the knee. They wouldn't. And this year, I think Munkin's in a weird spot, a little older. No one was going to give him a head coaching job.
So if two playoff caliber franchises actually wanted him, why didn't either of them ever get the chance to say so directly? Here's the part of this story that barely got covered anywhere. Cowherd said that when the pre-draft process was happening, one of the real problems was that Deion, or possibly Shedeur himself following his father's lead, made the call that they would not talk to any team that already had a quarterback on the roster. Any team. That single decision reportedly knocked out two real suitors, the Eagles and the Ravens. Two organizations that were genuinely interested in Shedeur Sanders as a quarterback prospect, according to Cowherd, and both of them got the same answer. We're not talking to you. Cowherd's reaction to that, even retelling it months later, was somewhere between disbelief and secondhand embarrassment. Guys, that's crazy, is basically how he put it. Think about what that actually means in practical terms. Steve Young sat behind Joe Montana for years before he ever got his shot, and it worked out about as well as a career can work out. Aaron Rodgers sat behind Brett Favre, also worked out fine. Sitting behind an established starter, learning a system, developing without the full weight of a rebuilding roster on your shoulders, that's not a punishment. For a lot of quarterbacks, it's the exact path that turns a raw prospect into a franchise guy. Cowherd specifically named the Ravens as one of the teams that was very, very interested, and said he's read that from more than one source over time, not just repeating a rumor he heard once. The actual bottleneck was never NFL scouting departments deciding he couldn't play at this level. It was a family strategy that took entire rosters off the board before a single formal interview ever happened. Think about how many prospects would kill for that kind of interest before the draft even starts. Two organizations with real quarterback development track records, both willing to sit down and talk, and the answer they got back was essentially, don't bother. That's not how the process usually works for a player trying to maximize his draft position. Most prospects and their families are doing everything possible to get in front of more teams, not fewer.
And that strategy, whatever the reasoning behind it was, is exactly what a lot of people around the league now point to when they try to explain how a talent evaluated as a second or third round arm ended up sliding all the way down to a fifth round pick, number 144 overall.
I don't think he's a bad kid. He's just immature.
But here's the other thing. If you remember when the story came out about Shedeur, one of the problems was Deion had convinced him, or maybe he had convinced himself, they would not talk to any teams with quarterbacks. So the Eagles and the Ravens were interested. They're like, we ain't talking to you. It's like, guys,
crazy.
I mean, it's like now Steve Young sat behind Joe Montana for a while. You'll be, Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre. It can work out. The Ravens were one of the teams that was very, very interested.
Now rewind to today, because this is where the story actually flips. Here's the twist nobody saw coming when all of this was happening last spring. Remember how the Ravens got shut out during the pre-draft process because they already had a quarterback? Their offensive coordinator at the time is now the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, Todd Monken. Cowherd pointed out that Monken has been coaching in this league for a long time and doesn't need Deion Sanders explaining offense to him. But more importantly, Monken's own history with quarterback evaluation traces right back through that Ravens building, the same building that reportedly wanted Shedeur and never got the chance to sit down with him. Cowherd's exact comparison was sharp. Imagine a college coach showing up to an NFL building saying, give me 2 days, I'll tell you everything about this prospect, and the front office just says, we've already done that work. We already scouted the guy. That's basically the situation now. The doors that got closed during the draft process are reopening on their own timeline just a year later and through a different path. And the results back it up. Cowherd said flatly that an outside quarterback who came in independently with no connection to the Sanders camp looked at the Browns quarterback room and said Shedeur is the better player. Not a family friend, not someone with a reason to be biased, just an evaluator looking at tape. Add in the Deshaun Watson situation and the picture gets even more interesting. Watson is said to make roughly $45 to $50 million if healthy, and if he's healthy, he starts week 1. But Watson has not proven he can stay on the field, and Cowherd put the over-under for games started by Shedeur somewhere around 6 or 7 this season, maybe more if Watson goes down again. That's not a bench role. That's a real path to significant playing time on a rebuilding roster that already looked competitive without their top 3 defensive pieces in the playoffs last year. There's also a betting angle here that tells you how real this competition actually is. Cowherd set the over-under for games started by Shedeur this season at roughly 6 or 7, and that number could easily climb higher given Watson's injury history. This isn't a token camp arm keeping a seat warm. Vegas numbers reflect real expectation, and the expectation is that Shedeur plays meaningful snaps in 2026, regardless of how the depth chart looks on paper in August. So here's where it lands. The same instinct that reportedly closed doors with the Eagles and the Ravens during the draft may end up costing Deion nothing at all in the long run, because the tape is finally speaking for itself now that Shedeur is actually on an NFL field, getting evaluated by people with zero connection to his last name. Cowherd's read on all of it is that Shedeur isn't a bad kid. He called them a little immature, sure, but a good kid, somebody his own teammates genuinely want throwing them the ball. The talent was never really the question in this story. The access was.
The way he was throwing
Yes.
in. The Dylan Gabriel, who seems like a nice kid. I mean, I don't know many people that had draftable grades on that guy. So, I mean, and it was just clear. Now he's behind Shedeur with a guy that just independently came in from the outside and was like, Shadeur's better. So I think it's going to work out. But I'm with you on Deion likes Deion. I mean, there's
a lot.
There's a reason Jerry Rice, used to go at it.
So let's be honest about what actually happened here. Strip away the noise and here's the timeline. Deion Sanders reportedly ran a strategy during the draft process that took any team with an existing quarterback off the board completely. That knocked out the Eagles. That knocked out the Ravens, a team Cowherd says was very, very interested, backed by more than one source he's read over time. The result was a talented passer with real arm strength, real pocket mobility for a guy his coaches praised, and receivers who actually wanted to catch his throws, sliding from a projected second or third round grade all the way down to pick 144 in the 5th round.
Cowherd, backed by what he says is 20 years of NFL relationships, called it exactly what it looked like from the outside. Deion hurt his son in the process, even if the tape never lied about the talent underneath it all. The issue of holding the ball too long is real, and it's fixable. The unathletic label was never fair, and the film proves it. But none of that mattered as much as who was and wasn't allowed in the room during the weeks that decide a player's entire draft trajectory. And now, a year later, the same organization connected to one of those spurned teams is the one giving Shedeur his real shot, with outside evaluators who have no reason to be biased confirming what Cowherd saw on tape the whole time. The doors that closed in the spring reopened by winter, just from a different direction than anyone expected. So here's the real question. If Deion had just let Shedeur sit down with the Ravens and the Eagles like every other prospect, does he go in the second round instead of the fifth? Or does keeping those doors shut somehow end up putting him in the exact right building anyway, with a coach who already believes in him and a starting job that might be 6 or 7 games away? Do you think Deion's approach helped Shedeur or hurt him more? Drop it in the comments. Smash like and subscribe.